Welcome again, Chris Jennings here. What I'm planning to do for this little screencast here is to talk about how we add the menu bar in the previous video that we've looked at. How we add this to content that's already on our web page. Now, at the moment, as you can see, I've got my play that I've already created. I've done some styling to it. I'm no doubt going to work on it a bit further, but there you are. That's the basic play with the dramatis personae, and then we go straight into Act 1, Scene 1. I have actually got the menu or the table of contents already here. I've just brought these things down. You know, we actually have now a main box, which is covering everything. Then we have the section for the dramatis personae. I'm just expanding these in Atom now. And then we have the play, of course, which is very, very long. So the navigation bar is constructed from the table of contents, as you know, which we've already done through exporting from InDesign. But what I've done currently in my CSS is to simply hide this the table of contents, or effectively the dramatis the navigation bar, which is here. So here we have effectively the same that we've had in the previous episode, the previous video that you've looked at, which explains how to make a responsive navigation bar. But I've basically taken the same CSS and just delivered it into here, but currently I've simply hidden it by putting the display to none. So I'm going to now reveal this and we'll save that, and you'll see what's actually happened. So we've got something here across the top, which is sort of delivering sort of what we have in mind, something like that. However, we do need to do one thing first to the HTML before we start tackling any further information within the CSS. What we need to do is, I'm going to go back to the HTML. What we need to do is to actually take out the navigation bar outside the main box. So the main box, as you can see, I've styled currently to have a white background and have a limited width. But what I'm planning to do is to take this navigation bar and put it across the top of the page, right away across the top. So what I'm going to do now is to actually take this out. So you can see, if I just bring this down, you see what I mean, that we've actually got inside the main, we've now got our navigation section. So this whole section I want to take out and put it above the main. I mean, the other way of doing it, which is probably a lot easier, is to cut this out of here and then go down to the end of the navigation section and actually then close or I should say open the main in here. Okay, so what we've now done is we've put it up here at the very top of the page, as you can see. Okay, so effectively, what we've actually done then is to put that up at the top. Currently, it's as you can see, it's scrolling along at the top. So my plan now is to fix it at the top. So I'm going to now go into my CSS again, go to my nav bar, and in here we're going to actually fix this into position. And we use position fixed. We don't necessarily have to do this because by default it will stick at the top anyway, but I'm going to put a top 0 and a left 0. Now we may find that will now put over, as you can see, over on the left hand side, although there isn't room to put everything in it, but that's fine. What we now need to do is to give it a width of 100%. Okay, so that's kind of done the job, and if we now select these items here, we've still got some work to do. I don't quite know why it's for those elements there. I think I see why, but that's okay. We'll sort that out in a moment. But what we do need to do is to make sure that we can actually see the top of the page, because currently, although the fixed aspect of it does work, we are of course hiding some of the content. So what we need to do then is to put some padding at the top of the body, to bring that further down. So I'm going to use padding, let's say we'll have padding at the top of, I'm just going to guess the numbers now, but I'm going to try 65 pixels. Okay, that's kind of a little bit too much, but that's okay. We can leave it like that, so we have a little bit of space. Or if you prefer, we can actually reduce it down to something more like 50 pixels. Okay. All right. So so what we now have to do is to work out what's going wrong with this. So I'm going to now focus on my navigation elements down at the bottom of the page. So don't forget, we're actually looking here at the way this is arranged on a wider screen. So on the wider screen, this is what it looks like. I've actually arranged it over to the right-hand side. So what is happening here is within this media query is what's currently being delivered. We will actually, of course, have to focus on what goes on when this is on a narrower screen, but that would be something like this, which again we need to address, but we will have something like that. And what we need to do now is to take focus on this part of it within this media query here. So currently, what's happening, I think, is that each block, each bit of content is each menu item doesn't have enough space because Dramatis Personae, as you can see, is wrapped around. So I'm going to make that something more like 12 rem. That's too much, so let's actually take that down to that's more like it, although again we have to address these issues here. So in order to understand what's going on with the menu bar, just need to really take a moment to explain to you about how flex works, how we can actually have items flexing. Now, as you may appreciate, that I've already, within the unordered list, I'm just going to scroll back up here. I've actually determined that the unordered list within the navigation is displaying using flex. By default, in other words, when we're using a smaller display, the direction of these flex items is in a column. And that's actually what's set up here. What we're actually looking at the moment is a screen that is wider than 580 pixels. So therefore, for the unordered list, we actually change this to become a row. So the flex direction is in a row. Thus, it's arranged across the top of the page like this. Now, I've also, as you can see, aligned the items in the center, but that's really not that significant because we do simply have one line of text at the moment. And I've also justified the content to be at the end. So in other words, it's ranging to the right. Now, this doesn't have to be like this. We could actually use something different. We could, for example, just simply make this into the center, which then puts the whole of that navigation item in the center of our screen, of our window. The other way of doing it is to have, for example, the space around. So in other words, spread it out around the whole of all of those items, like this. So now we distribute it all the way across. So this is the other way that we can do it. And then finally, let's just look at that one last example, which is the space between. So now what happens, really not any different because, well, not much different. Let's just save that. Because what's actually happening now is that we're only providing the space between the items. At the left and the right, we're right up against the edge. So each of those last items go right to the very end. So anyway, so what I actually want, my desired effect is to have this at the end, so that it's actually ranging to the right like that. That's what I've done there. Now the other thing to bear in mind is that the width of these items is determined by what we call the flex within the items themselves. Now, if we just go down here, what we've actually got here is in this. Okay, just to remind you, the unordered list is displaying flex. The items inside it effectively are the list items. So that's what we're targeting. So this expression here, flex 0, 1, 6 rem, what that basically means is 0, you're not allowed to grow. So I don't want that width to grow at all. The number 1 says that it could possibly shrink if it needs to. But the desired width, and I put a desired width here of 6 rem. 6, in other words, 6 times the root setting for the font size, which is, as you know, 16 pixels by default. So that's the desired width to fit in across there. If I expand it, if I make it larger, let's make it 8, for example, then it just really just ranges things across. You can see if I roll over how I've actually got a much wider menu item. So essentially that number there is quite important, because we might want to then make that the same number for our drop downs. So you can see at the moment our drop downs are actually wider, so they go out to be wider. So what I need to look at is the width of those, and the width of those currently is 8 rem. So if I now change that back to 6, we should then find that we then get that lining up. Now the only thing is that what we're actually getting is we're getting it too wide on the rollover. So we would need to look at that, and that's, I think that's down here actually, yeah. So we've got that to be too wide there. So that should now give us the same width. Now that's basically what we've got, and as you can see, this is a fixed item, so it actually now allows us to navigate somewhere within the play. What we need to do is to think about how we're going to address that problem, but I will come on to that in a moment. There is a problem when we click on one of these links. As you can see, it takes us to the right place, but we really need to be down a bit further. So that's one of the things that we need to address. I've got a problem there, as you can see, but that's something I can address again later on. So let's just take a moment to see how we're going to resolve some of these problems. Just one other thing before I forget, we do also need to add the name of the play, and there are a number of ways of doing that. Now it really does depend on how you deal with the changeover when the monitor or when the window is narrower. So as you can see at the moment, I get to about here, and then it just simply changes to an alternative view. So I've got a couple of things to do there. For example, when we have this, we need to then bring down, we need to make sure that that's not covering over the content. So there are a couple of things to do there as well. So let's first of all tackle the problem of the whole page being hidden under the under our navigation when we are on a smaller device. It's okay at the moment, as it is as you're looking at it at the moment, because I'm on a slightly wider display. But as soon as I reduce my size down, then this is working fine. But the problem is it's covering over all of the content. So what we want to do then is to put some padding in the body. So we'll just try some numbers here, but I think probably it's going to be quite a high number, 360 pixels maybe. So we're gonna try that. Of course, I should have just done that at the top, not all over. So let's just correct that. Okay, so padding at the top with 360 pixels now does at least provide us with, with a view to the whole thing. So, but obviously that's not necessarily correct. Although, as you can see, I've already made the amends here by actually, we look now at our media query. Down here, I've actually already in here put the padding to the top to 25 pixels. So in other words, when we're on a larger monitor, we've got a padding at the top of 25 pixels, and when we are on a smaller monitor, that dramatically increases to make sure that our navigation is not covering that over. Now, obviously, it just depends on what you want to do. If you want to hide this altogether and actually only have it available when you click a link, that's a different thing. But I'm not going to. But in my case, I'm keeping this quite simple. We've got two different options here. When it's a larger screen, we see this, and when it's like this, we see this. Okay, now the next problem is actually an interesting one, because when we click on one of these links, let's just say, for example, we want to look at Act 3. That's, well, it moves to Act 3, but as you can see, we miss the top. We miss the top of this. It actually just sort of pushes it down slightly. So what we need to do is to find a way of bringing it down when we link to that act. So let's actually look at a scene, for example. Okay, it's disappeared off of the top. We're just hiding it slightly by our navigation bar. And this is probably even worse when we're looking at it on a monitor like this. So if I click here, so it's actually quite a dramatic mistake here. So we need that to be resolved. Okay, let's just focus on our larger monitor and just look at this again. Let's take this one here, or even just the dramatis personae. You see how it's just slightly there. Now, in order to resolve this, we could put some kind of margin or padding or something on each of these items that it's linking to, but that obviously just will make that make a permanent change. What we can do, however, if we look at the, we're now going to have a look at the actual HTML. So I'm going to look, for example, here. Here's my, just highlight that. That is actually what we're linking to. Now, conveniently for us, the way that this link works is, as you can see, we actually have an ID that's been added by InDesign. Now, I should say that if you're not seeing that, there has been an issue when you've made your table of contents, but I will help anybody with that issue if you don't see this. So for each of these links, in this case to the dramatis personae heading, we should see a link with an ID of some number or ID that InDesign has put in. So what we actually have then is an anchor or a link here inside each of these. Let's take a look at, let's just move down, see if we can actually find it. I'm just going to look down, see if I can locate the next scene, which is not too far down here, I think. Yeah, it's here. Okay, so here, for example, is the next scene, scene 2. And as you can see, also, this has an ID of ID anchor 003 for this. Let's just shrink it down a bit here. So you can just see there is an anchor. Now, that means that what we can do is that when we can move this, when we get to that point, we can actually move it so that the whole page comes down. And the way that we do this is actually in the those two places. Let's just scroll to the top here. Let's say we'll actually look at this in here. Doesn't matter whereabouts we put it, but essentially what we actually have is H1. So we've got H1, and inside H1 we've got an anchor like this. We've also got the same thing with an H2. So those are the two places where we're actually making a links to. So what we can do is to use position to actually bring this down by pushing it down, and the way that we can do this is to use position, relative, position. I'm not doing very well with my spelling, am I? Oh, frustrating. Okay, and then we want to use a relative position. So in other words, where this item is, what figure we're going to put in now is relative to where it should normally be. It's quite an important difference between relative and absolute. Absolute moves something to a position measured X and Y on the actual screen that we're looking at. Relative just simply moves it from its original position. So what we want to do is to use a negative. We want to use a negative position to bring it up. Or sorry, I should say to push it down, or to bring the link down. And we're doing this by a negative position. So I'm going to use something like 80 pixels. Let's just see if that actually works, because obviously it's going to depend on the width, or the thickness, the depth, I should say, of your navigation bar. So let's actually try that. So I'm going to click on Dramatis Personae, which should just stay more or less where it is. Let's just go to Scene 2 in Act 1. And as you can see, we do get that now. We are able to see it. It's not hidden. We could reduce that number slightly, I would have said. That might be better to be maybe 55 pixels or something like that. Let's just try that again. Yeah, so we've got that just about right. So any of these links now should take us so that it appears at the top. Now, that's not actually, of course, going to work when we're looking at this on a smaller display. So I'm going to just go back now to my smaller display like this. And as you can see, we're not revealing that. It's now moving. It's not moving enough. So this figure here is perfectly fine when we're looking at it in a larger monitor. So I'm going to take a copy of that, because I'm going to put that into my media query here, which of course, if you remember, is when the screens are wider. So let's actually just put that in here. And that should still work for our our basic wider display. So if I now just go to this, it should be still working, but it's not working for here. So what we need to do then for normal display, which is here, for normal display, when I say normal I mean narrow, we need that number to be much more. So it's probably more like 300. Yeah, let's just try that. It's probably too much. Let's just have a look. Okay, it's not quite enough, so we probably need to do that just a little bit more. So I'm going to make that 360. Yeah, well, that's because we've got padding at the top there, so that probably should be about right. Yeah, so we can navigate to those areas. Right, so in the next session, we'll take a look at adding the title of the play to the top of the page, and also make sure that that links back to the home page for our overall site. And also we'll do a bit more work on the media queries to get a better looking view on a smaller device. So see you for the next session.